Hey there, welcome to How I Got Hired. This is a show about ordinary people like you and me and how they created extraordinary success in their career. My name is Sonal, an international career strategist and founder of Supercharge. I strongly believe that a fulfilling career is a birthright and not a privilege for the lucky few who have access to expensive education, capital, and networks. I am now on a mission to democratize access to high-value career advice with my digital courses, with some coaching and content, with my YouTube channel and this podcast right here. So listen, you deserve to have a career you actually love, even if you just got laid off, even if you took years off work to take care of a family member, even if you are underpaid and overworked. If you're looking for practical strategies and tactics to build a career and life that you're proud of, you are in the right place. Listen, once you're done listening, I want you to promise me something. I want you to walk away with this singular thought. If they could do it, I can do it too. Now grab your favorite warm beverage and let's get started. Hey there, welcome back. You are in for such a treat today. I'm speaking with Kristina Mand-Lakhiani. Kristina is the co-founder of Mindvalley. And if you don't know what Mindvalley is, oh my gosh. Okay. It is the world's most powerful platform with 20 million followers. I am one of them. I'm a member of the Mindvalley community. And essentially what you do is you learn so many things on this platform, from mind, body, soul, entrepreneurship, career, everything, anything. Kristina has been in this sort of personal transformation space for over 2 decades and is an international speaker, entrepreneur, artist, philanthropist, all the things. But how did Kristina get here? We need to learn about her journey, from her journey, and what is coming up next. Can't wait to speak with you, Kristina. So excited for this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Sonal, thank you so much for having me and for giving me this chance to share, and for being actually Mindvalley follower.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Kristina, there is the Mindvalley app. So I cannot start my day without the meditation on that app. I cannot sit in a room and just sit still. But with that app and with these headphones, I'm in a good place and it's a great start to the day. So honestly, amazing. So let's talk about everything about Kristina, the career, Mindvalley, all of this stuff. So let's go back. I like to start with the origin story, Kristina, because I'm tracing you now, in the late 90s, early 2000s, university student Kristina. I saw on your LinkedIn that you studied international politics. You were in Scotland, and then you worked at the UN and Oxfam and a couple of other gigs. So before we talk about Mindvalley and how everything changed, let's talk about those early years. And when it came to things like interviewing, getting noticed, standing out, getting hired, what do you remember from that time and what helped you?
So, considering your audience, I'll actually probably say something completely new to my to any kind of interviews, because I don't talk about this part of my life so much. But I will start a little earlier. I'll actually start with the end of 70s, beginning of 80s, because I was born in the Soviet Union, which actually did influence a lot of what we're going to talk about right now. I was brought up in the Soviet Union. So it was a very different environment for people, contemporary people. It's a little hard to imagine, but I would say imagine North Korea, but on a much bigger scale, and part of it being in Europe. So that's pretty much the restrictive environment where I was brought up. So you did notice that I studied international politics. One of the reasons why I wanted to be in politics, and specifically international politics, was because I wanted to travel the world. And of course, in Soviet Union, being a very restrictive society, not democratic society, being in the government was the path to actually having a decent life, to earning good income, and to traveling the world. So that was the reason behind my career choice. Now, I was 14 when Soviet Union collapsed, so I went to university already in the new world. But with that said, So Estonia is a part of Soviet Union, and I know people, when they say Soviet Union, they immediately think Russia. I have never lived in Russia. It's Estonia, but it was part of that system.
Yeah.
So when the Soviet Union collapsed, Estonia transitioned into Europe. But what happens to countries which are in transition? A lot of things are turned upside down. Now, government was particularly that area, because in government we had a lot of functionaries from Soviet days, so communists, and they had to go. Because if our country wanted to have a decent chance at a new future, they had to replace everybody who was already in politics. So what happened was that when I started my career, most of the people in the government were very young. So I actually got my first job actually at 14, but then my proper job, where I was mostly working and then studying on the side, I was, I think, second or third year in university in Estonia. And I started working for the governor of the capital region here in Estonia, doing international relations and public relations. So it was such a high position for me that I was not legally allowed to occupy it. So most of my career, I was what they call, the person who was doing the work, but I was not fully in this position because I wasn't the right age. I didn't have the right degree at some point. When I finally was the right age and I got the right degree and got my position fully, I got married and left and started everything from
Oh, how ironic is that? Oh my gosh.
so,
Oh my gosh.
but
I'm just gonna pause you here because you shared a lot. I One of my closest friends is from Estonia. She
yeah.
lives here in Brussels, and I've heard a lot about this. And she shares stories from the time of her parents. And I'm going to say this to the listener: if you have friends who used to be, I stressed it's important for us to know, because this is a time that uh, cannot be erased, and it's a big part of who you became right later.
Yeah.
So much so, even the career choice. I like how practical you were. You were like, okay, we've been in this sort of position for a while. What am I going to do when things open up? I'm going to travel the heck out of this place. Like, what is one way to do it? International politics is my ticket to get there. So, and that's exactly what you did. And second, the fact that legally you weren't allowed or whatever. I mean, people made concessions. It worked out. You were doing the work. You were benefiting from doing the work. Maybe not so much visibly. Maybe behind the scenes, because they couldn't.
No, it was properly done because I worked for the government.
Ah, ah,
But what happens is that because the law didn't allow me to have this high position before I got, so I was still
ah,
studying in university. So there were two clauses. First of all, my age, I had to be 21 and I had to have
ah.
the bachelor's degree by law. But because I wasn't there yet, but I was doing this job, what they did is that I was, I don't know how it's said in Estonian, but I was doing the responsibilities of that position without fully being
Yes,
in that position.
yes, understood, understood. So, do you remember? I know this was a while ago, Kristina. Do you remember how did you start working with the governor? Because it sounds like a pretty prestigious role. And this is like if you look at an 18, 20-year-old today doing that, like, wow, that's amazing. How did you get that?
Yeah, it was a prestigious role, and most of my colleagues in my position, let's say from European countries, were in their 40s, and I was not even 21 at that time. But I just want you to understand that, and that was the context that I was trying to give, that we were in transition and we had
Yeah,
no one to fill
yeah,
the roles.
yeah.
Because most of the people who were in that industry, or not industry, I mean in the government, they had tainted themselves with communist ideology, so
Yeah,
they had to
yeah,
leave for a really long time. I think the period was 10 years. You could come back into your into the same career path 10 years later, but for 10 years there was a ban on taking this position. So, for example, when I was when I was in this high position at such an early age, the Minister of Education and the Minister of Defense in Estonia at that time, two different people, were both 27 years old.
wow.
By my contemporary understanding of life, these are kids.
Yeah,
And well, we have had a prime minister who was 35, I think, a little later. So it was just the mark of the time that a lot of people who came to
yeah,
lead the country had to be young,
yeah.
because we didn't have the chance to become to become communists yet. Now, how I got this job was also partially thanks to my university. I was a little bit obnoxious all my life. So we had...
I love how we're getting into the Flawesome side of things already. I love it. I love it. Let's go.
I
When
think
you
it's
say
all...
obnoxious, what do you mean, Kristina?
Yeah, I'll explain. So when I was in university, I studied public administration for my bachelor's. So part of the studies was that we were going to different institutions and getting to know them from inside, whether it's a ministry of finance or whatever. So we came to this governor's office, and the guy who was giving us a tour, he was one of like the heads of this institution. He said, "Oh, and if you want summer internship spaces, we'll take you guys." And I needed a job because I wanted to earn money, because I was part of a student organization called ISEC, and we traveled a lot. So I was actually
Yes.
rather busy
Yes.
because I had to study. I was part of the student organization, and then I thought I need a job because I need money to travel.
Yes.
So I came to this guy later, and I said, "You know what? I want a job. I want to be paid, and I want to have the freedom to travel when we have, events." And
I want. I love it.
he said, "Sure." He didn't call me for 2 months, but 2 months later he said, "We have a position. It's a new position. We don't know, we don't know anyone to fill it. And if you dare, come." So that's what I did.
And were you interviewed, or you just got the job?
I believe there were interviews, but it was a long time ago, and it was more the direct relationship I created when we came as students, and we probably asked questions. I don't really remember the particulars. I remember him saying that they will take us, and I remember me calling and saying I need a job, and then a few months later he did call me for interview. Of course, I remember dressing up for that interview.
Oh my gosh, I love it. But I think one of the reasons he called you is because he remembered you. And the reason he remembered you is because you made an impression. And the reason he made an impression is because you spoke, you
And
asked
also,
questions.
the one thing I remember from that period of my life is that I never worried about losing a job or losing a salary. And that was the privilege of me being still young. And, I still lived with my parents when I studied in university, because university was in the same town. So I never needed any outward signs of independence, and didn't bother me to consider myself dependent on my parent. So because of that, freedom from any kind of responsibility, I had the audacity to demand.
Audacity, and you weren't afraid. And I think this is also, like you said, a privilege, because it's a very different mindset, a mindset of scarcity versus a mindset of, I don't know, let's see, pick one. Where do you want to work? Where do you want to study? I love that. All right, so that is how it started. And let's talk about how, Kristina, you ended up co-founding this company. Because, when we hear about co-founders, especially in the world we live in today, which tends to share successes that look beautifully curated on social media, to the outside world at least, right? And I'm greedy here, Kristina. I want to hear everything. I want to hear about this journey, from how did you co-found it, and also those challenges, particularly in the early years, because I think the stats speak for themselves. Number of startups never take off the ground because it's so scary, and failure after failure, and they're like shutting shop. But obviously you guys didn't. So talk to us about that.
I think I've always had this laissez-faire approach to a lot of things that I was doing, in the sense that I cared more about what I was doing rather than the decorations around it. So, and I think that has been my driving force. Maybe that's why my career turned out the way it was. So, as I said, at the time when I was finally ready to take on my position in the government full on,
Officially,
25.
Yeah.
I was partially wondering what will happen to me next, because I have made a career really, really quickly. It's important to note that, yes, I have been a perfectionist all my life, and I did finish school with a distinction, and I got a medal from the president and all of that. So I did have brains to match my audacity. I hope I still do them to have them. So when I was 25, I got married to Vishen, who is the famous founder of Mindvalley. And he lived in New York at that time. And being a little bit traditional, I thought, okay, I guess my job as a wife is to move to New York. Well, in fact, we got married.
Sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but how did you end up meeting?
through the student organization that I mentioned, ISEC.
ISEC.
Yeah, he was part of it in New York, in US. I was part of it in Europe. We met at a few events. We were dating long distance, and then at some point he said, "Why don't you move to US?" And I said, "But you know, I have a life here, friends, career, family." So we decided to get married to be a little more committed to that move. And when I moved to New York, I had to start everything from scratch, which was a shock on many levels. First of all, I realized that in New York, bachelor's degree is not a degree at all. It's just something. People ask me if I could speak English on interviews. I did have a very material problem of not having a proper work visa. So when I was going for any kind of interviews, I depended so much on them loving me, because they would have to apply for my visa.
Sponsor,
something which is a little hard in New York, considering that there are so many people who are knocking on their doors. So it was an uphill battle, and at some point, I don't remember how long I was trying to look for a job. It was a few months for sure, and I did everything I could. But at some point, so Vision at that time was working full time to earn a salary to sustain our living, and Mindvalley was his hobby project on the side. So considering that I was there and I couldn't find a job for a considerable amount of time, and I didn't even have a visa to work that would permit me to work, I thought that something I could do and could be useful was to help Vision with his business, his startup. And that's how I ended up in Mindvalley. So when people ask me, how did you end up in Mindvalley? I usually answer that I incorporated it. That's how I ended up in Mindvalley.
Yeah. I like how you just kind of landed into it. But I have been there, Kristina, following a spouse to a completely different part of the world, South America, because that's what a good wife is supposed to do.
Yes.
And I just got promoted, like literally peak. You were 25, I was 26. And also the culture I come from, you're living together. That means basically you're married, right? I'm like, yeah, I got the ring to prove it. Okay. So and I struggled as well, particularly not in Uruguay, but I struggled in Chile to find work. Talk to me about those months, because your mindset during that time, rejection after rejection, you can't help it. The US is one of the most difficult countries to get employment in, and you were going through the motions day after day. You must have had good days, not so good days. What made you continue to show up?
So you see, I said I had this somewhat laissez-faire approach to things, and I didn't bother about earning the living. And I think sometimes we overestimate that threat. Of course, I've lived in Malaysia for 16 years, so I know it is a threat for some people, but for most people in the Western world, especially in Europe, by the way, where our social services are so strong, the threat of actually ending up on the street is not really as strong as we are afraid of. So I guess that removed a lot of stress from my searchers. Now, one thing that I did is that in psychology, there's this difference between the two different mindsets. I have to look it up because I don't remember the exact terminology, but the difference, and I will simplify it. Let's say pessimists and optimists. The actual term is a little bit different. So the difference is about how we perceive life and our interaction with the life. So for example, if you fail an exam, the way the pessimist and the optimist processes that event is very different. So pessimists generally tend to generalize, oh, I'm always a failure. They take on the blame on themselves. They say, it's because I'm stupid. The optimists are, again, it's a simplification of this theory. The optimists say, oh, I was unlucky. I actually, I was so hungry, I was distracted, and I didn't give my 100% to this. And they don't generalize. They say, that's a one-off event, I'll try again. So I guess, without knowing, because this is subconscious, I had, maybe it was because of my age as well, and my carelessness about income, I just didn't take it as something about myself. Also, I'm really good at creating stories which make me feel better. So when I would go for an interview and it was a decent interview, and if I didn't hear back from them, I was like, it's again that visa issue. It's really hard to convince someone to apply for an American work visa for you. So I had a lot of ways to not take it personally.
Yeah.
And with that said, I also tried to make myself useful. So I did a lot of other things, which I don't remember anymore at the same time, while I was helping Vishen with Mindvalley, because he was full-time employed for a company. So naturally, there was a lot of work to do. So that gave me some meaning, obviously, and at least I was helpful. I was also writing some stories. I was starting a blog. I just wanted to do some writing and exploring. Then I did some translation for a company in Estonia because I wanted some income, my personal income. I didn't bother about going hungry, but at least I wanted to have money to buy a gift for my husband. So I kept myself busy. And
Yeah,
that's
I like it.
Worked.
I like that. I think it's kind of like what you were describing, the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, right?
This is
Based on Carol Dweck.
This is a somewhat different theory, but I guess there are a lot of overlaps in that.
A lot of
Now,
overlaps.
I did bring out one thing from that year in New York. I only lived for 1 year. I decided that I need to get a higher degree. I wanted to get a master's degree and in an English-speaking university because the degree was a huge issue. A lot of the companies in New York, particularly for the type of jobs I was looking at, were requiring masters or higher, and bachelors just didn't cut it anymore. And I was tired of the stupidest question, do you speak English? I'm like, which language are we having this interview in?
What idiots! Sorry, really. There's so much prejudice. So you went back to study, and
Yes.
why Scotland?
That was actually a miracle story for me because you see, when I didn't know I could study in English. I didn't know I could study anywhere abroad because in the post-Soviet countries, there were only two types of people who studied abroad: the people who were the children of high government officials,
Mm-hmm.
or the people whose parents were semi-criminal, very rich oligarchs.
Okay.
So it's until now very similar. This transition hasn't fully happened. When I went to study in university in Scotland, the proportion of people, students from our part of the world, considering the size of the population, was very low.
Yeah.
So when I applied for the universities in UK, and I wanted UK because, if you get a UK degree, nobody's going to ask you if you speak English.
Kill the question,
So.
just nipped it in the bud. Okay, got it.
So I wanted to study in UK, and also I always had I love the country. But it was something so otherworldly and something out of my reality that I didn't know I even had a chance. And then Vishen, and bless him for that, he said, no, it's very simple. You go and you apply to 5 universities. You have to apply to 5, at least 5. Otherwise, if you get rejected from 4, you at least get 1 yes. So I applied to 5 universities. I applied to my 2 favorites, Oxford and Cambridge, but I made a huge mistake because our degrees were not completely compatible. So I applied for a degree higher than, I made a gap, so I naturally got the declines from there. Again, you see, the same thing is working. I don't blame it on myself. I know I did the mistake.
Yeah,
but
one-time thing. Yeah,
I got accepted to 3 others, and I picked Edinburgh over. Most of the other 2 were in London, but my friends from UK suggested Edinburgh. It was a leap of faith. I didn't know what I was going into because I knew London. I didn't know Edinburgh, but I never regretted for a day. Now it's now 20 years later that university has actually been rising in rankings. So I'm really happy for my matter.
Amazing. And then you graduate, Kristina, and you go back to Mindvalley, and you just like,
No.
It's a force. Talk about what happened afterwards.
So you see, you are also from a traditional background, so you know how it is. You have to follow your husband. And also another very interesting belief was
Pitter patter of little people. Oh my goodness.
And don't work with your husband was another one which I bought into. So I was still trying to find my own path in life. Yes. And I started my life in government. I got slightly disillusioned by governmental jobs. And I think somewhere there was always this good girl who wanted to make the world better. That's why I ended up working for Oxfam. I was working a little bit for UN. I was never disheartened by things. You knock on the doors, they don't give you a job, they give you an internship. You do internship, you get more connections, you find a little job, you find a little job, you find a big job. It's all doable if you're determined and if you're not distracted by the decorations. So I wanted to work in non-governmental sector. I was slightly disillusioned by UN as well, because it's a huge organization and not very let's say optimal.
It's a machine.
So I wanted to start my own charity at some point, and I did a lot of charity on my own, with my own money, with my own time, and that was my path. And doing international politics actually was in line with that path, because it's still the same, just a little bit different side of the fence. But I came back to Mindvalley eventually, and that was a bit of a miracle, I guess.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And why do you say that was a bit of a miracle?
Because it wasn't my plan. I ended up in Mindvalley a little bit accidentally.
Yeah.
So how it happened was that after my first child was born, I wanted to start getting back to the office, and I was very passionate about starting a foundation to work with refugees in Asia. Of course, I had issues with money at that time. I couldn't. I needed to find sponsors and things like that. But I wanted to come to the office because, when you're by yourself, it's a little lonely. So I started coming to the office, doing that charity work from the office of Mindvalley, and I kind of got pulled into it.
Yeah, I understand. And those early days, pre 2012, pre 20, talk to us about that period in Mindvalley, because as leaders running the show, I'm sure there were a complete roller coaster. Talk to us about the biggest challenges and how you overcame them.
Well, Mindvalley has such a long history, and we've changed so much. What it was 20 years ago and what it is now, these are two different stories. But it's like with children, you see them every day, and you don't realize how much they grow and how much they change until you find accidentally a picture of them.
And
like,
it is your first child in a way, isn't it?
Chronologically, yes.
Yeah.
When it comes to priorities, no.
Of course. I meant biologically. It was birthed first.
Yeah, and I think that's what happened to Mindvalley. I never noticed how it changed. I've always just been there, and I've been in different roles with Mindvalley. I've been more into it, less into it, and that relationship evolved and changed as well. And it's true for Vision as well, to a great degree. What I can say is that it is a product not of just the founders, and not even just of the people who work for Mindvalley, but our authors, our partners, our audience, more than anything, the community. Because if your business, and again, when I talk about Mindvalley, it as a business, we have to understand that there are so many different phases of entrepreneurship and doing business. Entrepreneur and entrepreneur are very different creatures sometimes, because people have different motivations, different mentality in entrepreneurship. They build different things. Very simple comparison would be somebody who's into startups and then making them public or flipping them. It's such a different animal from a person who is in business for passion. And then there are a person who is in business for passion, but they want to do it themselves. They, in essence, their mentality is a freelancer mentality. They have like the structure, the legal structure, but their essence as a person, they're just employed by their own company, versus people who are in passion, but they're building business. These are such different self-expressions in entrepreneurship. Yes, you have a question.
100%. No, 100%, because Vision talks about this. It's completely bootstrapped. No funding from outside. So there is lots of passion of getting things done yourself, which gives you so much flexibility. Like you said, the independent mindset, which I'm sure hasn't been easy, right?
Well, there are benefits to getting funding, obviously, but there are also, it's the choices you make. I don't say that one way or the other. There are plenty of examples. The question is not whether what you have to do, but the question is what you feel that you need to do, that you want to do. What is your heart telling you? And I know that in business, one of the advices, which was very viral a few years ago, don't follow your heart, follow your brain. But that's not true. Even the people who are in business out of completely pragmatic reasons, and they're maybe sharky, they're still following their heart. They just love money. They just love accomplishment. They just love, it's still their heart. And they employ
Yeah.
their brain to serve their heart. And we are so mistaken. So I don't say that, you have to bootstrap or you have to go for venture funding. It's up to you. What are you building? What are you doing? I'm not saying that you have to build a business. For me, that worked out. I prefer having a team. I don't like
Yeah.
being alone. I don't want to be the only person to do the work.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
want my company to depend on me, because one day I'm going to die. I want to leave a legacy. If my business depends on me, then when I die, there's no legacy left. But these are my personal choices. Somebody is a beautiful craftsman and they don't want a big legal entity around them. They just want to do what they love to do. And they're fine selling their time for money. It's the question of what your heart tells you have to do.
Yeah. I'm follow your heart all the way for me. Follow your heart. Any day, 5 days, 7 days a week. So I appreciate that. We're going to talk about Flawesome. So, Becoming Flawesome is a book that Kristina has written, and it should be around. It should be out around the same time that this episode is out. So, extremely exciting times for you, Kristina. And let's dig a bit deeper. And the word Flawesome, right? So, for someone who's listening, what did you just say? So, we're literally combining the words flaw and awesome. But the emphasis, Christina and I were chatting backstage, is on awesome, because the awesome has an E in Flawesome. So let's talk, Christina, about your Flawesome. I'm calling it like it's a noun. um, have you always been aware of it? Have you had to hide it? Particularly when the stages you were on got bigger and shinier.
I have to confess that I'm a child, nepotism child, I think, is it called?
Nepo baby.
Yeah, because you see, I just happen to be a co-founder of a company with one of the most
Yeah.
glamorous stages in our industry,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I started my path of an author from that stage. So it's not incredibly easy to intimidate me by the stage, but that's just my privilege, I guess. But you can intimidate me with the audience. I was once quite intimidated when I had to speak to, it was just a podcast, not even like a stage, but the audience were psychotherapists. And God, I have so much respect for this group of people. And that actually was intimidating. I still find huge crowds intimidating. I
How do you
prefer
deal? How do you manage those, Christina, when you are intimidated by something? Let's say an audience that looks really smart, or just large crowds of people. How do you do this?
So sometimes you can deal with that, sometimes you can't, because if you are, for example, speaking to an audience that just isn't your audience, there is a possibility of a scenario where you are not going to engage them. And I've experienced that too. And at that point, you have to source that optimist or, growth mindset that
Mm.
it's not about you. It's just the wrong match. You try again. Now, most of the time you can engage with the audience, most of the time. But for that, you have to be present. And when I mean being present, that means that you have to pay attention to your audience, which is why big crowds sometimes intimidate me, because I don't see them. The thing that helps me the most is just the memory that I'm there for someone else. I'm not there for myself, not for my own, feel good. Yes, of course, I would like to be a good speaker. Of course, I would like people to like me. Of course, I would like to have a high rating, and I love standing ovations. But I can't go on stage for that. When I go on stage, the thing that I keep in my mind, I usually try to breathe a little bit before I go on stage and close my eyes and be. I know it's a little bit fringe thinking, but I do try to remind myself and meditate with that group. Not that I'm asking them to meditate, but I'm just there, trying
Yeah.
to remind
Yeah.
myself that I'm here for you guys. That's the thing that I tell myself when I go on stage. No matter what happens, as long as you reach someone there, you haven't been here in vain. And that's the only thing that helps me. And I
Beautiful.
tell you, sometimes there are even reverse. I was once at an event where I was promised a 200 audience, and they had a lot of sponsors, and it was so beautifully, glamorously arranged, and in such an amazing location. And I came, and their audience just didn't show up. And I had 10 or 20 people in the audience. That was even scary. You come there, am I shooting myself in the leg? But among the two people who were there, well, among the 20 people who were there were an ambassador, there was some, really amazing people. So sometimes you just have to adjust. Play, dance with the music.
Dance with the music. This is beautiful. And silence the ego. I love this example of meditating with the audience because, it's like the anxiety or the nerves have been shared with the 500 people and eventually dissipated. So that's beautiful. And people relate because every one of us has been there, right? And speaking of, Flawesome, and speaking of things that we're not particularly proud of, I want to ask you, Kristina, very practically speaking, about your favorite tips, tools, frameworks that you could share with us today for particularly this one person who's listening, who thinks that, they're ashamed of that flaw they have. I'm putting this in air quotes, the flaw. What, for example, a very thick accent or lack of confidence, or they feel like they've been job hopping too much, so they don't look good to recruiters. You talked about the fear of public speaking, whatever that may be, right? W- That shame can engulf us if we don't manage it, right? So, talk to us about how you do this in your own day to day life.
So I'll get probably to the feeling of worthlessness, and do remind me if I get distracted, because I want to, since you asked this question, I want to slow down a little bit on the fear. So for example, when you go on stage, you might be afraid of your fear or ashamed of your fear, especially if you go on stage with a lot of accomplished speakers, and you might imagine that they're not afraid. Although, trust me, I've seen almost every big speaker off stage and behind the stage and before they go on stage. A lot of them are nervous. A lot of them are nervous. Most, in fact, are. The thing is that, and you see, you could stand there and feel worthless because you're feeling it, thinking, how come I'm a speaker? I'm supposed to be a good speaker. It's not my first speaking gig. Why am I nervous? And this is one path that you can go down to and make that fear increase your feeling of worthlessness. Or you could just take it as it is. There are two reasons why I like fear before I go on stage, because I've spoken on stage without having fear, and usually I bomb. But usually when I have that tension, it is fear. It is objectively fear. When I have that tension, I know that I am actually geared up to perform. I'm alert. I'm present. I make an effort. So for me, fear is also part of the resourceful state that I need to be on stage, even if it's unpleasant. And the other reason why I like fear is because I lose weight when I'm scared. Very helpful after 40.
That's always welcome. Always welcome. Yes, particularly as the metabolism slows down. This is
But
so interesting.
but that
You said
aside,
two reasons. Yeah.
But that aside, well, the other one is because I lose weight. The other side is that, it's okay to be afraid on stage, but you shouldn't show it. Yes, I know we romanticize vulnerability, but then when you go on stage, it's very important that you actually can possess your own presence. So there's a difference, and it's a huge difference. It doesn't mean that you don't feel the fear. You feel it, but you don't let it stop you, and you're not going to be obsessed with that. You're not going to let it distract you. You're not going to throw it on people and try to feel better about sharing, like, oh, by the way, I'm so scared. That's a huge mistake that every speaker who has been on stage more than twice knows not to make. So I have had some very impressive speakers tell me that they were uncomfortable or they felt fear, but they would never share that from stage.
So tell me, this is super interesting. So I'll just recap what you said. I love fear for two reasons. Number one, it tells me I'm alert, right? And I speak to my clients as well, CEOs prepping for a very important high stakes meeting, nervous, and I'm like, it's good. It also shows, number two, it shows you care, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just show up or do your thing and then you leave, and then that's the end of it. Weight loss is a fringe benefit here for sure. Uh, I want to talk to you about this. Oh, can I just say at the start of the interview, I'm a little bit nervous. You're saying never to say that. Because there's people who say, oh no, share it and then move on. Because by sharing it, you've kind of attacked the thing and then you've got it out of the way. Do you know what I mean? And you're saying, bad idea. You've seen some of the top speakers in the world because they are authors at Mindvalley. And you're saying, don't overshare that.
Not from stage. I mean,
Huh.
if you're in an interview,
Uh-huh.
there are no recipes in life. You always
Yeah,
have to dance with life. So there is no such thing that I'll give you an advice and always follow it.
sure.
There was one case when I shared it openly before the interview, and it was what saved my life. But I have to give you the context to understand. I accidentally ended up being a part of a huge international political scandal. And I was ready to stand up for the person that nobody wanted to defend. And it grew so big. It was connected with Estonian politics, and at that time I lived in Malaysia. It grew so big that a TV crew actually flew from Estonia to interview me because I was one of the very few people
Wow.
who
Yeah.
dared to stand up for the politician who was being shot down. So when they flew, all my friends said that I'm insane because this is the most sharky journalist crew out there. This show was known to be the most brutal show on
Mm,
Estonian TV,
mm, mm.
however channels we have.
We
And
have a couple of those in India. I know. I can
and by
relate.
that time, I had spoken with so much media already. That's why the why they were flying to me. So I have been left in tears. So I know how it is, how scary it is.
Yeah.
So, but I have this weird thing about justice. I just couldn't bail out. I said, no,
Yeah.
I will say what I think. So
Yeah.
when they came with the TV crew, I told them that I feel nervous
Mm.
and I'm scared and I feel vulnerable and I actually wouldn't want to be known in Estonia for being part of this political scandal. And if they could please consider with my feelings. They were so sweet and soft to me. I have never,
Those same
I never,
sharks.
yes. They were very considerate, and the show when it came out was very gentle on
Mm,
me and on our participation in that whole
mm,
thing.
mm,
They could have blamed us. They could have,
mm, mm.
they could have trod us into the mud. But in that
Yes. Yes.
circumstance, it was a lifesaver that
Yes.
it was open to
Sure.
them.
Sure. So it's always about taking the advice with your own circumstances and
Yeah.
your own situation. But I really like your advice on fear. And also when, a client goes to a very important interview and they're like, I think nerves are good. And if there's no nerves, I'm I get nervous that there are no nerves.
Yes,
So
it happens. But you know how you tell is you ask yourself, is this share going to give any value?
mm,
So
mm,
when I was talking to the journalists, there was value. I wanted them to
mm,
understand what I was going through
mm,
because
mm.
I was at their mercy. When I'm on stage, it's not going to give any value. Yes, it will show me as a regular human being, but everybody knows I'm just a human.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
need that level of vulnerability.
And also there's an ego play here, right? Making it about us. Oh, I'm so nervous. Oh, you're fine. You did great.
Fishing for
So
compliments. So,
exactly.
so you see,
Exactly.
you did ask me about the big scary stages. When I was going first time on the biggest Mindvalley stage, who I share stage with the best speakers in the world, and I was still kind of new. Of course, there's one thing that helps usually. We compare ourselves facet by facet. So when I was going on stage, I compared myself, for example, with Michael Beckwith, who has the most
Mm,
explosive, amazing, strong energy on stage. I could never
beautiful.
do that. I will look like a crazy animal on stage if I try to copy his energy. People will think, what's wrong with you? Then I would share a stage with best-selling authors, for example, New
Authors.
York Times best-selling authors, and I will ask myself, so what have I done? Well, by now I have written a book, thank God. But I remember that one time when I was literally tearing myself down piece by piece. Oh, I'm a co-founder of Mindvalley. Oh, there's a guy who has started a much bigger company. And you feel smaller and smaller and smaller, because if you take yourself facet by facet, there's someone who has done it better than you. Now, at that moment, I remember when I was going on stage, I remembered a friend of mine telling me, we're so obsessed with the idea that we have a talent that we sometimes forget that we are multi-talented. And what makes us valuable is the unique combination of our different little talents. So it's not the question who's better speaker. It's the question of what is your unique mix.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not to take yourself into pieces, because if you take yourself into pieces, there will be nothing left. And then when I realized that, this is what I have, not that I'm best at speaking, that I'm the best entrepreneur, that I have the best book, but the mixture of what I have. And it was the same time I was standing outside trying to remember how to breathe when that lady walks by and says, "Oh, it's you. I've been looking forward to your speech because you're so relatable. When you speak, I feel like it's you speaking to me directly." And I realized that, I'm relatable exactly because of those things which I think are my flaws. And I've been criticized for my accent a lot. I've had people walk out of the room because they don't understand my accent, or I've been told in the early ages of Mindvalley not to speak on any videos because people will be annoyed by my accent, because it's not the popular accent, Latin or French or British. It's the obscure weird accent which will make people wonder rather than hear what you say. So I kind of get it. But then I remember when I went to that stage, what I reminded myself is there's this one woman who was waiting for me because she sees in me what she doesn't see in anyone else. And my value is not because I'm a copy of another speaker. My value is in me, in my journey, in my experience. And that gives me strength to just do it, nevertheless.
That gives me strength. That gives me goosebumps listening to this story. It's beautiful. I always love this is, anchoring one person in the audience who has this friendly face. Thank goodness for you. And like, I'm not sure who's listening. I'm not sure this is going to go well. I'm going to see. And eventually that person does come back and say, hey, listen, that spoke to me. And you know what? That's all we need. We don't need millions of crowds. Our ego needs millions of crowds, but we don't. Our soul is happy with one. Beautiful story here. Kristina, this book, oh my gosh, Becoming Flawesome. Writing a book is hard. You have so much going on. And what made you say, one day, okay, I'm writing this? And also, according to you, why is this book needed today, now more than ever?
Well, I'll answer that question first. My book is in essence about self-love. And I think that contemporary world, despite what we see on social media, despite all this attention seeking, or maybe even because of that, is in so need of self-love. Because we seek attention, we seek approval when we can't give it to ourselves. It's a sign of the lack of self-love. Also, statistics says that 85% of people, adults and adolescents in US, have low self-esteem, which is the symptom of your bad relationship with yourself. So this book is needed because that's what humanity needs.
Yeah.
We hurt the world, we hurt each other, we hurt our planet because we are hurt inside. And the first person who can give you love, and the only person whose love you can reasonably demand, is you.
Yeah.
And when you can give it to yourself, you will not depend on the rest of the world giving it to you. And then there will be less of that, what we don't like. And I'm not going to go down that path. Now, writing a book is not hard. It's hard for people who do it for maybe as a project for a business model. And I know in our industry, book is part of a business model. It's an integral part of a business model. I'm a writer. And maybe you remember that in my early days in New York.
Blogging, yes.
I'm a writer. I didn't realize that until much, much later in my life. I like writing, and I've been writing. I actually did marketing before I became an author, and my favorite part, and the niche where I was doing marketing was writing emails. I am really good at communicating with audience. So it's not hard to write for a writer, because for a writer, writing is the form of self-expression. It's like if you're a singer, you sing. If you're a dancer, you dance. You don't do it because it's hard. You do it because that's how you express yourself.
Yes.
So that's why I wrote a book, because my message was there. It was ready. It's like, when you're pregnant with a baby, when the baby is ready, you can't hold it in. It will have to be born.
Yeah.
So that's what happened with my book.
And this is your fourth baby. Oh my gosh. And the whole, I hear you completely. People are like, you want to be taken seriously, you have to write a book. So it comes more from a place of, recognition, etc. For you, it was like, I got something to write. I'm going to write and I'm going to see how it goes. So, the whole the publisher route and all of that, was that complicated? Book proposal, putting all of this stuff together?
So when I started writing, I had a few questions in my mind, because I also did business in Russian market. So that was in the air as well, because I had different relationships there. So I had some publisher deals there. But in the end of the day, I decided to write in English because, as cliche as it is, but you have to make it in English, make it in the world. And actually, even in my industry, people who are really world-class, most of them are also have to work in English. If you can't do it in English, you're not going to be heard, unfortunately. So I chose English, and it was a question, because of course, you need to have a publisher. And I was stumbling behind it for a long time, until I decided but I want to write a book about being true to me. So is it wise to work with a publisher? Because the publisher will have so many restrictions.
Yeah.
So
Editor.
I actually wrote a book to be self-published. And I knew
Yes.
it was a very tough path to choose, but I also thought that this is in line with what I'm writing, because how can I let anyone tell me how to write? It was very rebelliously written. But then and of course I had an editor, and I was planning to publish it properly, but I did it to be self-published. But then when we started discussing the publishing, it just happened so that one of my friends approached a few publishers, and one of the most significant publishers in our industry, Hay House, was interested in me. And at that point, the manuscript was ready. And the book was there. So I chose to finally go with a publisher to give my book some extra support and strength and authority in the face of that, in the name of that big publisher. But when I went into that agreement, I also came similar to, you will probably remember me from 20 years ago earlier. I came and I said, I'm happy if you publish me, but it has to retain British spelling, European terminology, and I have to have the last word on everything. I don't want that book butchered. It's
I
important.
love this. I have written down in my notes, it literally says rebel and audacious. You were like, I don't want these people telling me what to do. I'm going to self-publish. And luckily you found this hybrid model and you were clear on your terms. By the way, I'm anal about British spelling as well. I will never be able to write neighbor with a O and all of the other things. I love it. And here we are today. And can I ask you, Kristina, how long did it take to get the first manuscript?
No, the writing was easy. That's my favorite part. It probably took me about a half a year, but I did require a little bit of structure and discipline, because book is a different format. And when you write in big format, you have to do it a little bit more consistently. Like I write
And deeper.
essays and
Yeah.
posts very quickly. I sit down and I breathe them out.
Yeah.
But with book, it requires a little more planning. So it took half a year.
Understood. Understood. I think
But
that
not
sounds
full time.
amazing.
I
Yeah.
only wrote in the morning before, because I still had business to run. So I only have like 3 hours of writing time every morning, from 7 to 10 or from 7 to
Yeah.
9. So
Yeah.
only that time.
I like that because I've heard a lot of book editors talk about that. Have a routine, set routine, X number of days a week, and this is all you do. And of course, you're doing other things, and I think that helps balance it as well. So this is so exciting because it's out, and my goodness, we're approached the end of the conversation here, Kristina. It's gone by so quickly. I want to hear from you when you look back on your career. This is a sneaky question I ask every single guest of mine. Is there one standout defining moment that supercharged your career and helped you to move closer to your current success?
Well, I think a big decision was actually going with Hay House to publish my book, because that made me that demanded me to that I grow a lot. It's been a little hard at times, but I'm still able to stay within my boundaries and balance between what society expects you to do or what convention expects you to do for success and what's important for my life. It definitely was a big propeller, but it's like like what I said with children. Sometimes you don't even notice. When I started writing a book, I didn't know it was coming to this. I didn't know anything. It's like you just focus on one step at a time, because sometimes when you lift your eyes and you try to see the whole path, it becomes scary. If 2 years ago, when I was writing this book, if I had known what I was coming to, I probably would have gotten scared and not gone into it.
Yeah. That's why they say ignorance is bliss. I don't want to know what it's going to look like, the big picture. I literally the step in front, and that's what you did. 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. every day.
Yes.
I love this. Beautiful. And so, Kristina, someone is listening today. How can they learn more about you? How can we get our grubby little hands on your book? Give us the deets.
Yeah, the book is out there actually, on all the bookshelves in US, UK, and Australia. I'm not sure about other countries. I know it's in Estonia as well. Maybe because I'm Estonian.
And other countries, because I have listeners in over 120 countries. When can the rest of us expect to read the book?
Amazon will send it all over the world, and I think it's launching in India at the end of the year as well. There may be other countries that I don't know the details about right now. So, to get to know me, I would ask you to read my book, because that's the best way you can support me. But other than that, it's Kristina Mand, Kristina in an Estonian way with the K, and it's my handle everywhere on social media, and my website is the same, KristinaMand.com. And in Mindvalley.
Yeah, of course. I'll make sure I link your website, your book, the Amazon, details, how to get the book, and everything in my show notes. Kristina, this has been such a pleasure. I wish you so much success with the book, with your career, and everything you do.
Thank you so much, Sonal, for having me. And it was such a pleasure to talk about myself. It doesn't happen often. I normally don't like, but you ask such interesting questions. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. If you loved this episode, please leave a 5-star rating for this podcast and leave a review as well. The reason is, the more reviews that you leave, the more my podcast gets pushed out into the algorithm to find the people that absolutely need it, so that I can help them supercharge their careers as well. And that is my mission. So leaving a review would go a long way, and I would be eternally grateful. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't wait to see you next time. Take care of yourself, and bye for now.